Good evening, children. During our last lecture, I had started the topic human circulatory system, and especially we started the topic heart. In this topic, we discussed about the various characteristics, various dimensions, the wall, that is pericardium, and these new terms I had introduced, and the details. We also discussed about the external structure of the heart, the three grooves or the sulci that are formed on the outer structure of heart, and we started after that the internal structure of heart, the auricles, the ventricles, and the direction of blood movement into various pathways. After this, we discussed about chordae tendineae, then the great blood vessels, the cardiac wall, and a very important topic with the amount of duration, that is the number of seconds that it takes, the cardiac cycle, right? The breakout into the phases and a total of 0.8 seconds. You have to really derive this, how this is coming. Now, we ended our class last time with the topic on cardiac output or heart output. Today, as we continue with the same relevant topics of heart, let us start with our new side topic as heart rate. Now, what is heart rate, children? We know that the human heart beats at around 72 times per minute in the resting condition. Now, this is different in an infant, that is a young child of less than a newly born child. It's around 130 times per minute. So this means that the heart rate varies not only from the adult to the child, but also from species to species. Usually what we see is that the smaller animals have higher heart rate than the larger animals. Look at this. For example, mouse. In a mouse, as you see, there are several hundreds of heart rate that are there in a minute, right? Whereas in a rabbit, it is around 200 heart rate in a minute, and in an elephant, right, it's around 25 per minute. So the question arises that why does this happen, that smaller the animals, higher the heart rate? The answer is that smaller animals, they have a higher metabolic rate or the rate of their physiological living reactions, and thus heart has to beat faster to supply nutrients and oxygen to the tissues, right? So this is applicable vice versa to the larger animals and so on. Okay, coming next to pulse. Pulse is the throbbing or the jerk feeling that we experience, especially in our wrist when we have observed it, the radial artery. So let us see by definition, what is a pulse? Beating of heart is also felt in arteries as jerks or throbs called pulse, right? So by and large, the rule says that the pulse rate is exactly the same as the heart rate. So here, as we said, that the heart rate is around 72 times per minute. So certainly the pulse rate also should be 72 times per minute. All right. So this pulse rate, the throbbing or the thumping of the blood that we can really feel through the arteries, right? It can be felt as 5 places. Right? What is a pulse? Actually, what is the reason for the pulse to be started? It's ventricular systole. Systole means contraction. Last time I told you that the ventricles, they contract or relax together. So every time the ventricles, they contract, right, or systole, they undergo, it causes the pulse. So this pulse can be felt in 5 different places. Let's see where. Radial artery. It's at the wrist. We have experienced the doctor feels the wrist and determines your health or the temperature, etc. Right? And this is at the wrist. Second is in front of the ear, and we call it as the temporal artery. Right? This is felt there. The third is the common carotid artery in the neck. Fourth is the facial artery on the corners of mouth. Fifth is the brachial artery at the bend of elbow. And sixth is the popliteal artery in the leg near ankle bone. So pulse, usually people know only about the radial artery, but it's basically at 6 places that can be felt. And yes, it is equal to the heart rate. Now coming to the topic blood pressure. Now all of you have seen this device for measuring blood pressure. Is what we call as the sphygmomanometer. This is the device that there's a rubber bulb and the blood pressure is determined. There's a mercury manometer and the valve is used to measure the or run the device. So let us see blood pressure, the device we call as sphygmomanometer. This was devised by a scientist, Korotkov, in 1905. The normal blood pressure of a human being, we know children, it's around 120 by 80 millimeter of mercury. Why mercury? Because the mercury is the liquid that's used in the manometer. Now this blood pressure, the healthy blood pressure, shows 2 limits. The upper limit is called the SBP or systolic blood pressure, whereas the lower, that is 80 mm, is called the diastolic blood pressure, right? So systolic blood pressure is the one when the left ventricle contracts, thus exerting a peak pressure on arterial walls. Let's see in the structure of the heart. Left ventricle. Now when this is contracting, children, obviously the pure blood is being given or sent out through the aorta. So this is the highest pressure, you know it, because the walls of the ventricles are also very thick, and the greatest jerk that is pushed or given up to the blood, because it has to cover the longest distance in the body to every part, right? So this is the pressure that we are talking about, 120 mm. Whereas diastolic pressure or the DBP is the reduced pressure just before next beat, when heart is relaxed and blood flowing into it, right? So this is the lesser limit, and that we call as the 80 mm of mercury. All right. So blood pressure, children, we saw it's measured in 2 phases, the systolic and the diastolic. Now there are many factors that regulate the blood pressure. That is several factors. Usually we talk about age, or let's talk about the cardiac output, right? Then we talk about the elasticity of blood vessels, the peripheral resistance, and yes, there are many other factors that affect the blood pressure, usually excitement or pain, or when we get annoyed, exercise, fear, adrenal secretion, obesity or being fat, etc. So let us see what are the major factors that play a role or affect the blood pressure. Age first. So let us see, with age what happens? Blood pressure increases with age, right? For example, a newly born infant, the blood pressure is around 90 by 55 millimeters of mercury. In a young age, it's around 120 by 80. This is the standard normal blood pressure. And in old age, it rises to around 150 by 90 millimeter of mercury. Now, why does this happen? Why do you see that the blood pressure increases with age? The answer is because the arterial walls become rigid and less elastic after the age of 60. So that's on the elderly side. The wall of arteries, they become rigid, that means tough, and lose their elasticity gradually, and that makes the blood pressure rise. Second factor that affects the blood pressure is the cardiac output. What was cardiac output? Yesterday I introduced this topic, that it's the amount of blood pumped by the heart into aorta in 1 minute, right? And that was around 70 ml during each heartbeat. Overall it was 5 liters, right? So let's say here the cardiac output, blood pressure increases with increase in cardiac output and decreases with the decrease in cardiac output. That means this is directly proportional to the cardiac output. Third factor. The third factor that affects blood pressure is the elasticity of the blood vessels, right? Now what happens, children? We talk about the fatty substance, the waxy deposit of cholesterol in old age, especially in the arteries, right? So due to deposition of this cholesterol in the old age, the blood vessels, they become less elastic. All right, they start losing their elasticity, and this is called as arteriosclerosis, right? This causes an increase in blood pressure. So this is again with the advancement of age that this happens. The fourth factor is peripheral resistance. Peripheral resistance, let's see what it is first. It is the resistance offered by the wall of blood vessels, especially those of arterioles, to the passage of blood, right? Resist means they are opposing, right? So increased resistance causes increase in BP or the blood pressure, whereas a decreased resistance causes a fall in BP. So naturally, it's like just the way out that how the arterioles, they are resisting the flow of blood. If it has increased resistance, the blood pressure will increase. If it is a decreased resistance, obviously the blood pressure will fall. Now blood pressure, let's see a note over here. The blood pressure is affected by a hormone called cortisone. I'm sure you remember this term, the cortex of the adrenal gland. You remember the cortisone? This controls the blood pressure. The pulse pressure is another new term that I'm introducing, children. I hope you have understood till here. Let us see what all things have we started. First, I introduced the heart rate. Then we talked about the pulse and the pulse rate, how it's equivalent to heart rate. We talked about blood pressure, what are the limits and why this is high or why this is low. The factors affecting blood pressure. The note. Okay, now another new term we'll be introducing, and we call it as arterial blood pressure. So what is the arterial blood pressure? The pressure exerted by flow of blood on the walls of arteries is called arterial blood pressure. All right. So here, this is, if we also relate this to pulse pressure. So pulse pressure, it's a symbolic way of denoting this, that the higher limit minus the lower limit of the blood pressure is equivalent to pulse pressure. So what is pulse pressure, children? The difference between SBP, that is a systolic blood pressure, and diastolic blood pressure is called pulse pressure. That is 120 minus 80 mm equals to 40 mm. Now, arterial blood pressure, obviously as the name tells, the pressure of blood, that is pressure exerted by the flow of blood on the walls of arteries is called arterial blood pressure. That is, if we talk about like this, suppose this is an artery and this is the blood flowing in it, right? So this pressure that the blood is exerting on the wall of artery is called arterial blood pressure. Moving further to another new topic called ECG. Let me first show you ECG. I'm sure you've seen this, the graphical record of the heartbeat or the electrical variations whenever a person goes for the heart checkup. So what is ECG? The abbreviation, it means electrocardiograph. That means the device we call as the electrocardiograph, and the paper that we receive with the heartbeat and all that, it's called as electrocardiogram. So let's see it. ECG is the instrument used to observe the working of heart, whereas electrocardiogram is the graphic record of electrical variations produced during a heartbeat or a cardiac cycle. Now each ECG looks like this, and look at the limits that it shows. There are 5 waves, that is WAVES, PQRST. Now ECG, children, we know that it's of very great importance. It's of immense diagnostic value in cardiac diseases. That is, any cardiologist or any physician would look at this ECG and will determine the normal or abnormal working of the heart. So what it is? Electrocardiogram is a graphic record of the variations just now we saw into PQRST. This is a standard ECG. Let us see what all does each of the alphabet denote. P wave, that is this P, it denotes the electrical excitation or depolarization of auricles, and this leads both the auricles to contract. So when auricles contract, this is received. Alright, then the complex QRS, this is called as the complex, so the highest peak. This causes, or this is due to the depolarization of ventricles that is responsible to initiate ventricular contraction. So look at the jerk, children. Auricular contraction was only this, whereas ventricular contraction is highest, right? The T wave is the return of ventricle from excited to normal stage, and we call it as the repolarization. Alright, so this is depolarization of the auricles, this is depolarization of the ventricles, and this is repolarization of both, that is they are coming from ventricle from the excited to normal state. The end of T wave here, end of T wave over here marks the end of systole or contraction. So this is what we have, children. Here I have written this all for you to understand. The P wave denotes depolarization. QRS complex tells you that this is the depolarization of ventricles. T wave tells you that this is the return of ventricle from excited to normal, and end of T wave marks the end of systole. Now again a note over here, an abnormality or an abnormal working of the heart changes the wave pattern of ECG. That is, this wave will become abnormal, and that will hint the cardiologist or the physician to know about further details of the heart's working. Another new topic is starting today, types of heartbeat. Heartbeat, children, first let us see the definition. What is a heartbeat? It is the rhythmic contraction and relaxation of auricles and ventricles to pump out and receive blood to and from the body. There are two types of heartbeat, neurogenic and myogenic. Neuro, as the name tells you here, it is because the impulse for this type of heartbeat starts or originates in the nervous system. That's why always remember, neurogenic. Genic means to be born, genesis, and neuro means where it is born, in the nervous system, right? Whereas here, myogenic, it originates in the heart itself. Remember myocardial infarction, the heart attack, what we have been studying in class 10. So neuro means nervous system, myo means directly the heart. So where is this type of heartbeat seen, children? Here, most of the arthropods and some mollusks and some annelids. Here, some mollusks and maximum of the vertebrates including man. The greatest of difference between these two is that first, if we talk about heart, suppose the heart is removed from the body of such an organism, right? It will stop working. Whereas here, if it is, even if removed from the body, will continue to work if it is supplied with the nourishment and proper conditions, especially like in humans. Sometimes the heart is removed from the body in various surgeries for patients. So let us see. Differences. The first one is cardiac impulse originates in the nervous system. Here, cardiac impulse originates in the heart itself as a patch of modified heart muscle called nodal tissue. Second, impulse reaches and spreads over the heart via nerve fibers, whereas here the impulse spreads over the heart via modified cardiac muscle cells. So again there's a difference, nerve fibers and here muscle cells, because these muscle cells are present in the heart. And finally, just now I already discussed that the heart will stop beating when removed from the body, whereas here it will continue to beat even if it is removed, but given a proper nourishment and proper condition. Alright, so that's about the heartbeat. Now coming to yet another very important topic, children, and this will clarify all your doubts about pacemaker and other things. Let's see what it is. structure of nodal tissue or conducting system in human heart, right? So what is this all about? The conducting system, you're talking about the relay or the impulse or the electrical impulse that is to be conducted in the heart. Like suppose you're sitting by the side of a very quiet river. Suppose this is a river. The water is calm and stationary and a person is sitting by the side. Now in this case, for any river or a wave or a current, the person, suppose he picks up a pebble and he throws into the water, then naturally the currents of water, they start originating at one place and they're conducted further. So this is what, when we talk of conduction of impulse in heart, children, it has to be initiated at one place and be carried to the entire structure. Alright, so what is this conducting system? It will conduct or relay electrical impulse, right, through the heart, and that consists of modified cardiac muscle cells. So it consists of following structures. Let's see, I have numbered 1 to 5. Number 1, SAN or SA node. What is the full form, children? Sinoatrial node or SA node. We also call it as pacemaker, right? So why do we call this as pacemaker? Because this SA node determines the rate of heartbeat, right? Pace means the speed of working, and that it makes up. So therefore it's pacemaker. Where it is located? It is here. That is, it is in the right atrial wall. Remember, this is the right auricle. So this is in the right atrial wall that the impulse for heartbeat originates. And this is near the opening of superior vena cava. You can see this. The superior vena cava, this is the inferior vena cava. So pacemaker or the SA node is near the opening of superior vena cava. Right? This structure is the immediate regulator of heartbeat. Remember, this heartbeat originates here. Coming to AVN, the second structure, we call it as atrioventricular node. We also call it as auriculoventricular node or AV node. And where is this located? This is located, this black structure, if you see, AV node, this is at the base of RA near interauricular septum. Interauricular, between two auricles, septum means this partition. So the position of this is below or let's say at the base of right auricle near interauricular septum. Then the third structure, the bundle of His or AV bundle, right? The bundle of His or AV bundle. Now this is, if you see the position, it's the blue structure that I have shown here. This is bundle of His. What it is, children? It's a band of specialized cardiac muscles in the interauricular septum and interventricular septum. Once again, bundle of His is a band of specialized cardiac muscles, and the position is, look at the partition, it's present in the interauricular septum also and the interventricular septum also. Now the bundle doesn't mean that it will contract. No, it will not contract, but it will conduct the impulse of the wave that has originated from the SA node, right, through fibers later on. If you can see these red colored fibers, Purkinje fibers, and they will be later on given up to the wall of ventricles. Alright, coming next to the fourth structure, right and left branches of bundle of His here. So here once again, this was the first SA node, second AV node, then bundle of His, this band of tissue over here, that is the cardiac muscles, and the right and left partitions. So this is the right partition and this is the left branch of bundle of His. Now finally, children, they terminate into very specialized neuromuscular fibers, right? And they are diverging from bundle of His. Look at this. The Purkinje fiber network, I've colored it red structure. And what is the function of these fibers? They will supply the entire impulse to the walls of both the ventricles, that is the right ventricle and the left ventricle. So in this diagram, children, what you're actually seeing is the journey of impulse. It originated here, it's transferred here. You can see the arrows, how it's being transferred. Then through the bundle of His, through the right and left branches, it is finally reached to the walls of ventricles through the Purkinje fibers, right? So that's what you call as the conducting system of the heart. All right. So this is a question. Why is SAN called a pacemaker? Because just now I told you, pace means the speed, because it determines the rate of heartbeat impulse, and it is formed of specialized cardiac muscles. All right. The last topic for today, children, and this is regulation of cardiac activity. Now, before this, children, I'd like to show you a diagram. By that diagram, you should understand this better. Look at the structure here. This is the neural control of heartbeat. First, look at this. This is the SA node, just now I showed you, near the opening of superior vena cava. This is the heart, the aortic branch, and this is the let's say medulla oblongata in the brain. You remember the function of medulla oblongata? To control the heartbeat and breathing, right? So if this is injured, it causes death of the organism, right? So what are we going to talk here? The normal heart rate, children, is controlled by two factors. Number one, there's a nervous control. The medulla oblongata controls it, that is increases or decreases, right? And the other is a hormonal control. So this, if you see clearly, there's a labeling here called as sympathetic or accelerator nerve. Sympathetic means this nerve will increase the heart rate. All right. And there's another what we call as parasympathetic or inhibitor nerve, because this will decrease the heartbeat. Right. So once again, who is the actual structure to start the heartbeat? It is the SA node. But SA node is itself under the command of the medulla oblongata. We call it as cardiovascular center located in medulla oblongata that controls the action of SA node. That means it will increase or decrease the heartbeat. So what happens? Look at this now. The nervous control, the SA node, just now I showed you how it is controlled by cardiovascular center located in medulla oblongata. Now it is made up of two set of nerves which arise from this center. One set we call as sympathetic nerve. This stimulates the SAN, that means it will be speeded up, right? And heartbeat increases. In the other structure of nerves we call as parasympathetic and vagus nerves. They will inhibit the SAN and the heartbeat will retard or decrease. Alright, so I hope you've understood, children. That is the integrated activity of the effects of this center of medulla oblongata controls the heart rate. This is what we mean to say. The purpose of this system is to increase the heart rate whenever the blood volume or the pressure falls in major arteries of the body, and decrease the heart rate whenever the blood volume or blood pressure increases above a normal level. And finally, the last thing for today is the hormonal control of the cardiac activity. There are two hormones what determine the effect on heartbeat. First is adrenaline. I hope you remember the emergency hormone, right? Now this adrenaline increases heartbeat by directly influencing the SAN. That is, this is also directly influenced by the adrenaline, and more the adrenaline, the increase would be there on heartbeat, right, by an influence on SAN. Thyroxine, that is the hormone from the thyroid gland in the neck, this will indirectly increase heart rate. How? This will increase the oxidative metabolism of body cells, right? And this requires more oxygen. Why more oxygen? For the oxidative metabolism, and this indirectly increases the heart rate. So what difference you saw here? Here there's a direct increase or if influence on SAN, whereas here it's an indirect increase. So today we'll be stopping over here, children, and only two topics are remaining in this chapter to finish. The first is double circulation, and the last topic would be disorders of circulatory system, which I'll finish tomorrow. So please write down these things, children. And before we close, let us quickly see what all things you have to study. I am sending the notes. Please copy them and revise them one by one. Today I started from here. The heart rate, pulse, the feeling of pulse under various structure or heart arteries at various positions in the body. We talked about blood pressure, factors affecting blood pressure. We talked about arterial blood pressure. Then We talked about ECG, the various alphabets or waves, what they determine. We talked about heartbeat, the types of heartbeat, neurogenic and myogenic, and the differences. Then we talked about the conducting system in heart, and I hope you have understood, children, that what all things, especially it starts from here and it's related to every part to the set and ending up in the wall of the ventricles, right? And finally, the last topic for our today's work is the regulation of cardiac activity with the nervous control and hormonal control. So as I said, children, tomorrow I'll be finishing this chapter. Only two topics are remaining. Keep writing, keep revising, and please post any doubts, whatever you face, children, and keep learning. Thank you.